We're going to continue on the theme of funding now, on the theme of philanthropy. And I'm actually going to hand over the moderation to Philip von Segebaden, one of our partners here from KTH. And we have also Jonas Nordlander, investor, and Pontus Braunerhjelm, professor in economics from KTH and Blekinge Technical University. Take it away, guys.
Thank you so much, Konrad. And yeah, it's really nice to have this session with both of you. We've talked a lot about many different aspects, and also the last one, investment. But one aspect that's not as much covered is, of course, the role of philanthropy. And I think partly because of what you said, Jonas, it plays a more minor role when it comes to sheer volume. But it plays also a very different role, an important role, I think, when it comes to funding research and bridging the gaps that we have been discussing. So I've been in this field, in philanthropy and academia for 15, 16 years, and made a few observations along the way. So it's going to be nice to discuss with you and get your input on that. And I think I'll start with you, Pontus. I think that you are one of the researchers, at least in Sweden, that I know that has really focused on this subject, the role of philanthropy when it comes to funding, also academic research. So that's my first question to start off the discussion. What do you think is the impact or importance of private donations when it comes to funding specifically academic research?
Let me just say first that I'm the odd KTH representative here. I'm an economist, I'm not an engineer. I know very little about engineering, and I have been doing research on philanthropic issues, as you say, but my main research field are entrepreneurship, innovation, growth, and things like that. I think that philanthropy can be a very powerful tool, actually, in society and in societal change. And I was interested in this field because of my work with research colleagues in the US, and they sort of opened up my eyes for this force in society, which has been not non-existent, but it has been on a relatively small scale in Sweden for a long time. And the important thing here is it's not only the funding, which is important. I mean, cash is important, but that's perhaps not even the main contribution by philanthropists, but rather that they bring in new ideas, new solutions, new ways of thinking of old problems, and therefore they become also a huge and potentially extremely important part in combating those societal challenges that we see right now. So the combination of that entrepreneurial drive and the resources that successful entrepreneurs has managed together is actually a force of change also. And I think you can see that in many different areas, from research, but also from things like missing people. There's a new way of looking for people that are missing, and then someone opens the boat, and there lies the victim, but the police didn't think of looking in that particular area, etc. So they complement services that are often provided in Sweden by the public sector. And if everything works to the best, the public sector will also learn from best practices, so to speak.
Right.
So they are, potentially very important force, but they could be better encouraged than the system as it is designed now in Sweden, at least.
Yes, we're going to get back to that also.
Yeah, right. So the short answer on the question is yes.
Really good. What's your thoughts on that, Jonas? You're here today because you're of course, an Ute resident, but also a private donor to one of our projects, the Phosphor Recovery project, for which we're very grateful. But as a private donor to academic research, how do you view sort of your contribution in this context?
It's a good question. I think, the way, when you look at philanthropy, I think as a sort of entrepreneur, you're always looking for, for me as an entrepreneur, you're building a business by making money, and with money you can build a larger business and you can employ more people and you can do more good or more impact. And then there are things which are pretty much impossible to fund. I mean, Zeynep, she's not a business person and she's not the best presenter, but she's onto something which is extremely exciting. And I mean, you're one of hundreds of different things that we get approached by. And again, here we had a contact with KTH, which was also a contact with this project, which led to us meeting and you know, really found this interesting. And I think, you know, there's a million ways this can go wrong. Hopefully there will be something that comes out of it. There will be something coming out of it. Maybe it's not something that will be put into sort of a business that you will start or someone around you. But it would have been impossible to fund it as an investment. And here, you know, philanthropy works. And in my way of looking at it is sort of, you know better about what you're doing than I. And instead of sort of saying, I want you to look at this and this and this, I believe in sort of trusting the person the way I trust an entrepreneur that I invest into. So it's, I think that makes it a bit easier for...
Right.
And and I think there's a lot of, when we look at, or when I look at sort of health issues, social issues, also some environmental issues, they are extremely hard to sort of get into a package of where it would be sort of an investment. And it's much, much easier because I don't have so much, I need to move. And then it's easier to just, you know, give the money, and after having sort of hopefully understood most of the idea that I believe is something good, and then get on with life and hopefully a year later get an update. Then investing into something which might take a lot of time to really understand if this could be an investment, and then you might come to the conclusion, which you usually do, that you don't want to invest. So I think that's the way where I make the difference between where I give away money or where I invest, is sort of that I don't have enough time to invest into the person or the idea to make it into sort of something investable.
Right.
But I'm still super keen on things moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And that connects back to the discussion we had around bridging the gap and how hard it is to fund. I mean, there are many great ideas floating around, but they have a hard time finding the right funding. So we can see many times, I think, that this kind of capital coming in is really a risk taker in that sense.
Right. There are many great ideas, but they're not really great until they're tested on the market, actually. You're right. And I think what you said there, that you want to move, and that's typical for entrepreneurs. And that's what we see in our analysis also, that they don't have the patience to wait and wait. And they want to see results. And it also means that you organize philanthropy in different ways. Some set up milestones, so you have to reach that milestones before you get additional funding. That is, they work more or less like a traditional venture capitalist, really. But you have also incorporated firms that do philanthropy. You see all kinds of ways of taking part in that now, and that's important. When looking at the universities, I mean, the philanthropists, they often go in, and that goes also for other projects, where the risks looks pretty high, and the possibility of reaching some kind of results are relatively vague and not so probable. So there you see them go in, and that means that they're also often relatively close to a stage where this, if it succeeds, so it's not that close, but if it succeeds, it may spur a lot of innovation also.
Right.
So you have that kind of societal venture capital function of philanthropy. And that has been recognized in the US since long. They actually have it in official documents from the Treasury and the Minister.
And I think we've only seen the beginning of that involvement in Sweden now. I mean, we have the more traditional old school philanthropist, which was more like institutionalized giving almost. And Jonas, you're a good example of the new generation of philanthropy, which comes in with, as you say, cash contribution is important, but you get so much more. You get the engagement, you get the networks, you get the time. They want to be part of even, framing the projects in the beginning.
That can make the academics a bit nervous, though.
Yeah, I've noticed many times.
That's why I try not to.
They don't want the funder meddle too much into the project.
But still, it's also as you said in the beginning, it's an important, new ideas, new perspectives coming in. So it's a balance there.
It's definitely a balance, and I think most US universities, they knew how to handle this, and I think we are still in a sort of learning stage. But of course we can do that as well. But it's up to faculty, to management at the universities. Now, I'm in the university world, but I must say, I shouldn't complain on my fellows, but it's perhaps not always the most mobile and dynamic and flexible organization.
We're 200 years old.
Yeah. So it's like the large firm and the small firm. The small firm is very good at coming up with those disruptive innovations that looks like, no way this will work, but then it works in the end anyway. While the universities is a little bit like the large firm. You do incremental improvements continuously, but you don't really come up with that radical stuff. Someone else does it, and often then, it's a combination with entrepreneurs and research findings.
Yeah. That's interesting to hear your view on that, Jonas. I mean, how's the reception when you come to academia? It's much harder, I guess, to evaluate what's going to come out, as you say.
Yeah, but I agree. You could make it a lot more exciting because coming to KTH, it's extremely exciting. There's so many things going on. We've been at this sort of space part. Can't get more exciting. And then we've looked at, a number of projects that the school is working on. But just being able to, in a small context like this, I was out here and I already have at least one partner here who has presented out of 6 that I will most likely do something with. And then we talked water, which I would like to hear more about, which we haven't had time to. So I think just you're one person with a fairly small team. I think just in some way getting to bridge that, because there's a lot of people who are super interested if you create that sort of day, like an arbetsmarknadsdag where students go to find their first job. You could actually go and just meet and you can probably present this in some smart way, and you probably do, and I know you do to a certain extent, but because for me it's also a bridge. If we take Zeynep as one example, this is something. If this turned into a mining thing where you could actually mine, this fantastic thing that we need to put on our fields to make them grow. This could turn into something super exciting. And obviously, since I'm supporting it, I would expect to get a call and say, we now found a person who wants to make this into a business, and we need investments. So there's you can make investments that are very small to get access to a company, or you can make a donation to an idea, and later on that could actually be your way into something when it commercializes. So it's and I think this is something that you need to also sort of teach the PhDs and the people doing the research, and invite all of these people you have on your Rolodex with all the money.
The value chain, from research to innovation to...
And I think it's a lot about storytelling. Zeynep, you're very sort of into I get a bit lost, and you could turn it into something more, if you help these sort of scientists to make it more into selling, the elevator pitch, that this could turn into this, moon project up here.
Yes. There are fantastic ideas at KTH and other universities.
Amazing
particularly
ideas.
At KTH, of course.
Of course.
But still, the diffusion of these ideas, I think, and that's what you're saying too, that's where the university could be stronger, actually.
Communicative ability. We've touched upon that during this day many times, and how important it is.
Yeah. No, but I think about putting together days like this with, maybe the generation that are a bit younger than sort of the Wallenberg.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No offense intended.
No.
No. I think it's good that we have different models and different types of philanthropists. So
Yes, absolutely.
variety is no problem in itself.
No, and there's so many things that there's so many ideas, and we talked about this today as well. I mean, when we talk about the Baltic, but you can connect this to food, and you can connect this to a lot of different things, and also to sort of businesses that these entrepreneurs or investors are involved with, where you can make these connections by just meeting, but you don't know. I mean, because these scientists are not the people that approach me. I mean, the people who approach me are people who have already come up with some kind of idea of commercializing something, and then they,
Right.
So it's a different stage.
Yeah. I was curious about that link between philanthropy and investments. Do you think along those lines when you, I mean, is there a clear thought between the philanthropic engagement and the possible investment? Or how do you make a strategy around it?
No.
Or don't you?
No, I don't. I don't. But I think I know. Obviously, I hope that a lot of these things where you donate money, you hope that they will find some way of getting a more sustainable way of attracting money, because it is, and this is also sort of packaging, and because there's so many fantastic people and so many good things out there that you can help with, but it's you need to feel that there is a long-term sort of, and that's why it becomes very easy to give money to Stadsmissionen if you're into sort of social or Race for the Baltic, very concrete. They have an organization, but there's a lot of fantastic people out there that you want to support them.
But that's also another interesting topic. You said about the longevity of projects, and the risk taker here is the philanthropic contribution. But we see many times, Pontus, and I think you can also tell that from research, that there is a leverage factor. If someone is taking the risk, it will attract other types of funding.
Well, of course, it's a kind of a syndication of risks that you then enable. You have someone who enters first, and it's more likely that others will join.
Yeah.
So that's how it looks, for sure. Yeah.
And that's a challenge. I from my point of view, as sort of new to this, I would say that Swedes have a tendency to be very shy. You don't like to talk about these things. I think there's a tradition that you give, sort of under the radar.
Not under the table.
No, not under the table. Under the radar, in a lot of projects, and there's a lot of money moving. But I think you, as a person, you're highly affected by what others do, and if you see that someone does something, if I see Daniel Ek is setting up a prize at KTH, then of course me and Philip start to talk, we should do something bigger. So so there needs to be some of the sort of American style to get people going, because if it's all like this...
We'll fix a special prize for you, bigger.
Exactly.
Right, special prize for you, yeah.
Exactly. That's interesting.
Du har en fråga där.
Okay, question.
So I have two questions, maybe to the three of you. So the first question is, what do you think that universities should do in a bigger kind of dimension to be better in this translation that we just talked about? And do you have any good examples, potentially from the States, that we can learn from? Because I think that KTH and Chalmers has a big role, and you could probably pull up your socks in this manner also. And the second question is, when we talk about this, that if somebody creates a prize or doing something that inspires you, you want to do the same. So maybe that's Jonas, because you're sitting on the dough here. What kind of forum and what kind of forces would be needed to highlight that, also to attract these people that you're talking about? Because I hear a lot of talk with the investment companies that I talk with. We have so much money, but we don't have enough projects. The projects are too small. So, and there are so many researchers and others struggling to getting to the money. So that's the question. What kind of forum, what platform should that be, and when is it going to happen in Sweden?
Okay, so first question is more for how universities can really change in that way to be more communicative, to bridge the gap. Is that the question, basically? Yeah.
And is there any best case example that you look at?
Mm.
You know, what is it? Is it MIT or Stanford? What are you looking at?
Yeah.
These are really good in this. We can learn from.
You want to have a go, Pontus?
You don't want to take this question?
Yes, I can.
I take it. I think there are a number of ways where you can increase the interaction with the private sector. You can have more of labs, of private potential innovators that are part of the sort of innovative environments.
Whoa! Spooky.
Not only that you don't have perhaps the entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs coming outside of university that you want to bring in, but also the large firms could be much more active. And I think we could learn from, I mean, of course, Stanford, but also Technion in Israel and other universities, Austin. So there are role models that we could sort of copy the things that we think would apply in a Swedish context, sure.
And to be a bit boring, then there are also differences in our funding models, of course. The US, much more private money, of course, for universities than we have in Sweden. So it's not that we can blue copy maybe something, but we can definitely learn and be a lot better.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And they have endowments, huge endowments.
And aren't they also able to get sort of, if they're doing research at Harvard, they can actually become shareholders in this project that would then later pay off.
That's another very big thing coming in here, that we have the professor's privilege, as it's called in Sweden. So the university doesn't own the IP, the researcher does, but in the US it's the university that owns it. So there are different forces in play here, I think. Second question was for you, Jonas. What kind of forum do we need?
Yeah, no, I believe, again, having access to Philip, which has been super interesting. And also, I mean, this is both as an investor and thinking about sort of the greater good. I mean, you always pop up when we have, maybe Philip can get us access to this person. And this can help both. I mean, in this case, you helped out here with this project, but there have been other instances. And you know, we talk about water, but there's so many touch points where you have researchers that have bits and pieces that could really make a huge difference in an idea or in something that's actually live in a business. And so there should be sort of a number to call where we could no, because it's and I think, again, if you are in a situation where you're an investor, if you know that you can invest, you know, and this doesn't have to be so much money, it can be a few $100,000, maybe $1 million, to go further into something that you're super interested in. And obviously you have a researcher who's super interested, and then you could use this research in either, you know, if it's something you want to give away money to, or if it's something you're invested into and you want to help. And I mean, there are companies like Kaggle who are taking the best brains in the world and connecting them with businesses, and that's a business in itself.
Pooling of passions, interests, and I mean, we have seen many passionate researchers as well. So, okay, I'd like to also, maybe actually round off with a final question about the challenges of being a philanthropist in Sweden, and the fact that, as we touched upon already now, there are some things which are specific for Sweden. We don't have any tax deduction, Pontus, for donations.
25% of 6,000 kronor.
Yeah, exactly. Which is very different from many other countries, and we don't have really the tradition of giving back to your school, for example. What kind of changes do we need, and why is this progress so slow? Because there is an interest from the civil society to contribute.
Well, I think there is an imprint over generations of certain policy recipes that has worked pretty well in building up the welfare state in Sweden. Some political forces still believe that this is like crumbles from the rich man's table, philanthropic money. So there is some political rhetoric and ideological conflict around these kinds of fundings at the same time as the government welcomed the Wallenbergs and others, of course. I think it would be a very good thing if you could introduce something like we have an investment deduction possibilities for investment by private persons, 50% up to 1.3 million kronor. I think we should have something similar for philanthropic donations also. Or maybe a bit lower. There is also huge discussion outside of Sweden whether these deduction possibilities are too generous in the UK, but also in the US. But I think, it would be a good signal from the politicians that they would allow some kind of deduction from your incomes.
And we don't have to go that far. If we look to Finland, or for example, where there are other things that have been done, there are matching programs.
Well, excellent, I believe. That the government match donations from the private sector to the universities with a factor 2 or 3 in Finland. They're now doing their third round, and you have a number of years when you can do this, normally 2 or sometimes 3, I think. But then that window is closed, and it's up to a certain amount that the government set aside, so you have to be first, so to speak, to get that leverage from the government. It's also a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
What's your thoughts on that, Jonas? Tax deductions welcome or not?
I don't know. I know that it's a big thing in the US, and it's not been sort of a big question for me at all. It's more of feeling passionate about something and
But what do you think
right
about this culture of giving under the radar, as you say? Is it still? I mean, if you don't give any money, you get to hear that you're just sticking to your money. If you give away, you often hear also that someone is trying to buy some kind of advantage. So it's really hard to be a philanthropist, I think, in Sweden, to walk the straight line to.
I don't know. I mean, I hope that a lot of this capital that's now amassed with very young people, that this will either be given away or invested into good things, and because it's. I think it's very old-fashioned. If you're not sitting on an industry that's sort of can be given to the next generation, I think it's a bad idea to hand over a lot of wealth to your children. So and that's I think it's going to be something there's going to be a lot of talk around this the coming 20 years.
Yeah.
With a lot of fairly young people. I'm not very young, but fairly young. That will have this struggle.
Yeah. So we see a positive
which is
trend.
good for you.
Which is good for everyone, I think. Yeah. No, but we see the positive trend definitely happening.
Sure. Yes.
So there will be changes.
And I think and here of course I think government, I mean there needs to be. I think if you work around this and create sort of some kind of system where you guide us. It's going to be a lot easier because it is really stressful. There's a lot of people who want to help you, but you need to be in a trusted environment. And I think you have, KTH is one example, Karolinska, these are brand names that comes with a lot of trust.
Yeah.